Hello everybody, my name is Liam Walken and this is my house. This thing is straight out of the 70s and today we'll be showing you how we went about transforming these stairs from this and turning them into this. So let's take a look. To start off, just removing the old railings, and all I did here is took a fine-tooth blade on the sawzall, cut it kind of down the middle there, and then wiggle and jiggled my way to freedom. Now, you'll be seeing a whole lot of demolition occurring here that aren't necessarily directly related to the stairs themselves. However, this whole house was getting renovated at the same time, and a lot of things were just happening as a part of that. Removing all of the old carpet and tiled flooring here, because we are going to be going with a vinyl plank throughout the house, including the stairs themselves, so we obviously need to remove all of the old floorings to be able to install those. Carpet coming out really easily just by hand for the most part, you know, maybe a knife here and there to cut it up into smaller chunks, and then removing all of the underlayment as well. Any tack strips were just kind of removed with a pry bar and hammer, and then some of the old trim we took out as well. I did all just to completely remove the old trim and drywall in the section rather than trying to, mess around with small patches and removing the wallpaper. There's so much drywall work happening in this house anyways. I figured what's another couple sheets for the stairs here? Just take a multi-tool, cut out that section, and then remove all of the drywall, put in some new drywall, mud it over, and I just kind of figured it would be more efficient that way. This is a semi-detached house, hence the block wall you're seeing now behind this section of drywall here that just divides the two units. That's kind of all that is, and then there's just the existing strapping on that wall, and we'll be using that not only to put our new drywall on, but also eventually for a railing that's going against this side of the wall too. These stairs were the squeakiest I'd ever stepped foot on, and that was due to these risers. They were seemingly 1/4 inch, maybe 1/8 inch particle board that really just kind of fell out of place. So I opted just to remove them entirely, and then once I'd kind of just kicked them out of place with just very light taps, really, I also removed the drywall on the underside of the stairs as well to get better access for replacing them. I did remove the framing here. That was just only to kind of house the drywall on that underside. So I just kind of took that out, and again, that's going to give me some better access. I did cut these 2x8s to size for the width there, and then use some construction adhesive both on the top and the side where they're going to connect to the two different stairs there. Drove in 3-inch construction screws from the top here and then also from the back side, and that way everything's going to be super strong and hopefully never squeak again. Now, obviously in this video here, I'm trying to improve my house by renovating these hideous stairs. But another factor that needed a change in this home was the smell. This is much harder to convey in a video, but trust me, this old house was quite musty and in need of a dire change. And that's where the sponsor of today's video comes in, Drift. Drift creates premium air care products to get your space smelling great. They're free of harmful chemicals so you can enjoy beautiful scents without compromising on safety. Getting started with Drift is simple. Your subscription begins with a stylish starter kit and your first scent. After that, you'll receive monthly refills because, let's face it, you deserve a fresh vibe every 30 days. The scent that I went with was Open Air, and it has completely changed the way I feel when I get home from a long day of work. I am now greeted by a warm, inviting scent, which has been a huge upgrade from the stale air this house used to have. I started by unboxing the Drift Home Scent Diffuser, and its 3 adjustable intensity levels has let me customize how strong I want the scent. The magnetic cover makes refills a breeze, and the rotating plug fits any outlet. Plus, its sleek design blends effortlessly into any decor. Drift is more than just air care. It's about creating harmony in your spaces from the car to your living room. So be sure to check out Drift and make sure to use my coupon code WALKEN at drift.co or to scan the QR code for 55% off your first month. This is the underside of those stairs, and also just kind of where the basement stairs are also situated underneath them. And all I'm doing here is putting up some additional 2x4s, and that's what we can eventually use to fasten new drywall to, and also just kind of tighten up these stairs even further, give them a little more strength. Cut forward a little bit here, and you can see everything was now primed. The floors were self-leveled everywhere where they needed it, which was about most of the house. And these walls getting painted now in Sherwin-Williams Alabaster. The floor is now going in, and this is a vinyl plank. It's a floating floor. I'll have the exact product info in the description if you're interested. But this was used throughout the house, so there were no transition strips everywhere. It just ran continuously, and that includes the stairs. So all we're doing here is just running it down this hallway. And as far as where it terminates on the left side of the stairs there, weren't really too concerned with how exactly that ended. So you'll see some deviations there. And that's just because later on, you'll see we're going to end up cutting that down to make way for kind of the new railing and everything going in. So for now, we're just working our way back. And then the only section we don't do is that very top one. So kind of at the top of the stairs there, you'll see that plank missing, and we're going to put that in later, but it needs sort of an additional step. So stay tuned on how exactly that worked out. For the main floor here though, just a very similar thing, running this vinyl plank everywhere. Obviously the direction shifted, that just kind of worked out better for the layout of the house. It looked better in my opinion, so that's the only reason for that. To make the actual treads, what we did here is we took a router and plunged out a section of the flooring here, maybe 1.5 inches down, and maybe took off about half of the material of this vinyl plank. Reason being is we are going to now bend this over. So you'll see that we made this jig, just some framing with a little gap to make way for the plank. And then it kind of keeps it at a height where it's going to kind of just divide that router section in half. And take a heat gun and heat it up for a good little bit here until it starts to naturally want to bend by itself, and just slowly starting to ease it down. We don't want to force it because we don't want it to crack, so we just want it to naturally start bending down, help it out where it needs it, and then we can take some more 2x4 here, take some clamps, and just really get it set down as it starts to cool now at that 90-degree angle. Now, I'm not entirely sure if that router section would be necessary in your situation exactly. It depends on the flooring you're using. This was a high quality product. It was very thick. So if we didn't have that routered section there, trying to bend this was just next to impossible. So it worked out for us. And again, another view here, same thing on that other plank, heating it up, letting it start to bend, helping it out, clamping it all down, and then letting it cool at that set angle. This top tread is going to be different from every other because it is tying into the existing flooring. So what I'm doing here is just taking some PL Premium and I'm going to apply a whole lot of it to the subfloor here because that's what's going to hold this plank in place and stop it from ever coming out. Now, with a floating floor, you're not really meant to ever glue it into place, but I figured with this one piece in the entirety of the house, I didn't really have any concerns with it, especially because it does have so much room for the rest of the flooring all around it to expand and contract. I just really wasn't worried with any issues with this, but you can see using a very generous amount of that construction adhesive, and then I did make any of the necessary cuts to this plank. I'm going to lock it in to that lengthwise plank just behind it there, push it into place, and where it actually meets and butts up against the other plank just on its left hand side, there's no actual locking mechanism to bind those two together, but that's not going to be an issue, and we'll show you why just later on in the video. As far as setting this thing up though, I'm just going to take a couple of clamps here and just clamp it down to the framing of these stairs. And that way, as the construction adhesive starts to cure, I'm not going to worry about any sort of warping or it coming loose from that bond. This here is some 1x6 red oak that we're going to be using just to make everything a little bit prettier here. So I cut this thing to size and then gave it a miter on that end to transition it. Kind of goes flat down, terminates into the flooring. I just thought it looked pretty sharp that way. But I did take some painter's tape here to mark out where all of the railings would eventually go, and then took a 4-inch block to space them all apart and marked just all the locations. That way I can come back with more construction adhesive and I'll take the 1x6 of red oak there, and that miter is all glued up at this point as well, but I can set that into the construction adhesive and then apply some construction screws into the locations that I mark for my railings. That way we're not going to have to fill any holes or anything. We can just use those for now to hold it in place. For my post here, I'm going to pre-drill out some holes and we're going to use GRKs, some nice big structural screws, to drive this thing in both through that red oak trim there and also into the framing behind it. I started out with 3 holes here, although eventually I did put in a 4th just because I felt like I wanted it to be a little bit stronger. I could have done them in a more aesthetically pleasing way, of course, but you know, this is my first time. I haven't done stairs before, and I did just need a little bit of a shim to get everything to be perfectly square. Using the level, I want to make sure that this thing is perfectly level before driving in these nice big structural screws. And later on, I did cut out some plugs out of the same red oak to fill these holes, glued them into place, and then sanded all down. So if you didn't know they were there, you wouldn't see them. As I mentioned earlier, here's how we're going to terminate the flooring up here. I'm going to start by just cutting out a end section of the flooring with a multi-tool, and then I have a pencil line to establish that straight line. I'm going to take the skill saw, run it through, and just cutting off the ends of all of these planks. Just like with below, I'll be using 1x6 red oak to kind of have a nice cap here. And all I did here is I took a router bit and plunged out maybe half an inch worth of material from the underside. So you can really see that on the left-hand side of where I'm currently holding it. Although it does also go all along the top of the board as well. And that's for a couple reasons. The first being a floating floor needs an expansion joint, a room to expand rather along the perimeter. So by having this cut out, I'm going to be able to take this red oak and put it directly on the existing subfloor. And then it's also going to go over top of the vinyl floor. So it's going to kind of cap off the edge of that vinyl to have it look really nice, but also allow it room to expand and contract. I also just rounded off all of the sharp corners from this piece of wood, so you can just kind of make that out in the video. Just use a router bit and then sanded them as well, and that just makes it a little prettier, a little smoother. And driving this in with screws, again, where my railings will go, and then here is where the post is going to go. I have a link to the kit I'm using here, but essentially I'm just getting a nice big hole pre-drilled into the framing below, and then I'm going to take this bolt here and just kind of slowly work my way down and screw it in so it's nice and firm. I do wish they would have made this a better shape to have more leverage on it, but eventually I was able to get it to the right depth. And then I can take a Forstner bit here at, again, the required size by the kit, drill it out about I don't know, 2/3 of the way through or whatever it recommended, and then I can also have a hole in the bottom of the post and just kind of put that over the bolt. I then got the kind of locking nut over top of that, and this was a really tight fit within that hole there, and I didn't have the right size ratchet, so instead just going, I don't know, like a 16th turn each time manually. Yeah, it was a pain. I should have just gone out and got the right tool for this, but you know, little by little, I was able to snug it up and get it nice and tight. Getting the railing in now, and this thing was a little bit warped. You can kind of make out that curve there, but believe it or not, this was the best one I was able to find at the store. Quality of wood these days really is something. To secure to the wall though, you can see I just took I think it was like a 1x4 of red oak once again, and I gave it a nice round over on all the edges, and then I screwed it in from the backside into the back of that railing, and then kind of put it up against the wall and put a couple screws into the framing of the wall itself. For this side here, it means the post, I'm just pre-drilling out a couple of holes using that clamp to make sure it's nice and level, and then I can use more GRKs to screw it directly into this post from beneath. Very similar idea for the bottom here, pre-drilling out those holes. Again, making use of clamps to hold it to the right height to get the desired slope on this railing. And then I can go in with some more GRKs to get everything fastened. For the top here, I did have to pre-drill everything out, and we'll later on fill those with more wood plugs, cut them, sand them down to blend them in nicely. For the risers, I'm just using 1/4 inch hardy board that comes pre-primed, and just gonna make use of both construction adhesive and some brad nails to get it into place. Later on, we filled those holes, sanded them down, and then painted them all white. I did opt to run a continuous railing on this side of the stairs as well, and all I did here was kind of marked out the rise using a chalk line here, and then installed 4 different supports directly into the framing behind it to support this railing. Now, I do want to try and get all of this wood to match my vinyl floors as best as possible, but obviously it's a different material. So with the red oak here, I'm just using a wood bleach on it to help try and get rid of some of those red undertones in it. After letting the bleach do its thing for a bit, I came back with some diluted white vinegar and then just applied that over all of it as well, just to neutralize the bleach there. I did end up going with some nice black balusters for this design, and as such, I'm using a Forstner bit that's just slightly larger than the radius of those balusters. I'm going to drill these every 4 inches on my blue painter's tape there, and I got the vacuum going to reduce the mess. Where there are construction screws, I did just take those out and then reinstall them in one of the now drilled holes. For all of these bottom holes, I believe I'm going at a depth of about half an inch, maybe half an inch to 1/4 inch, somewhere around there. I think it was roughly about the size of that Forstner bit, just the head of it. And I just need enough to eventually get my baluster into. And then for the top side, I'm going to drill out the hole double the depth of my bottom hole. And to mark these dots here, I just took my laser dot and kind of put it on the hole below. That way I know that my marking is directly above the existing drilled out hole. I could have spent a little bit more time trying to get this stain to match exactly with the vinyl floor, but it was pretty close and definitely good enough for me. And this was just the Watco natural finish, I believe, the Danish oil. And I think I did 2 coats of this stuff. To cut all of my balusters, I just made a little simple jig there out of some 2x4s, and I'm taking my grinder with a metal cutting blade on it and just cutting these to size, filing down the edges after. To size them all, I took the measurement from railing to railing and added an inch. And the reason for that, you'll see, is to insert these. I'm gonna actually take the baluster and first insert it into that top hole as the depth is deeper. And then once it's in, I can slide it down into that bottom hole. For the bottom holes, I'm using a 2-part JB Weld, the 2-part epoxy. And then on the tops, I'm using a clear construction adhesive, just because I was worried that epoxy might drip down, and epoxy, once it kind of sets up and if it drips, really hard to get rid of. So this ended up working out really well though. These things are really sturdy after the fact. Now for the stair treads themselves, using the exact method that we had showed earlier in the video to bend all of these, and we did this all at once and then just kind of cut them to size, or the width rather, after the fact once they were all made. And to install them, using a ton of PL Premium here, and then just setting them into place, making sure we kind of collapse all that glue and weigh it down. And we just left some weight on this overnight, and the next day they're really, really solid. We did eventually also just take some white caulking and go around all of the edges and then paint that over with trim paint, and that was it. And there we have it. Overall, I gotta say, I'm really happy with how these turned out. They're absolutely not perfect. Stairs are a little bit complicated, and this was my first time ever attempting something like this. A couple things to address. One, I think those posts, maybe I left them a little bit high, but that's kind of a minor detail. Two, the bottom of the stair treads, so the vinyl we bent, we could have definitely done another return on them to hide the underside of that vinyl edge. But for my house, I just wasn't concerned about that. You'd have to really be looking for it to see that. Kind of, I don't know, looking at the underside of the stair treads, which who does that? But something, if you wanted to do, obviously you could put another return on that 90. Another thing is that with this being vinyl, of course, and these are stairs, if you're maybe older or disabled, or I don't know, just like a oopsie kind of person, these could be slippy, right? So probably not for everybody, but for me, I'm a young guy, just not at all. Haven't taken a slip yet, and I don't foresee that happening. But obviously to each their own, right? This isn't the design for everybody. But with all of that said, I want to thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you liked the video, maybe just hit that like button on your way out. And of course, thank you to Drift for partnering with me on this video. Be sure to check out the link below. And with that, have a beautiful day.